Okay, well, I jumped the gun. Hey everybody, Summer Terry here at Superior Therapy, and on this live tonight, we are going to go through just a few short and simple things that you can do to kind of prolong your horse's career. As far as, like tonight, we're going to be talking just about the legs. And so a lot of what we're going to look at will also go through some of the things that we have already previously done videos about. And we're going to kind of give everybody a little bit of time to get on and get gathered up. And Pat's filming, so he's going to kind of tell me whenever we've got everybody here, and I can go ahead and start the actual portion of the live. So Spicy's hanging out here with me tonight to help. Again, we have other videos that you can check out. I'm going to touch on stretching tonight. I'm going to touch a little bit on wrapping and icing. Those are some of the things that we've already discussed in other videos. So if you need to go back and look at those and reference those individual videos, we've got a lot of playlists on the Superior page. Whenever you click our video tab, we're starting to try to order these playlists. That way you can go and find the information that you need. And so the first thing that I'm going to kind of start with tonight is just using a visual assessment. So we find that people end up sending horses to us because they've had, the start of arthritis, the start of joint pain, they've had a soft tissue injury or damage, and they're completely shocked and don't realize how they ended up at that position. And so many times, short of having an accident or something at a race that you can't control, a lot of times those soft tissue injuries end up being something that could have been prevented had the owner had the education or had the knowledge of kind of knowing what to look for as far as warning signs. And so if you think about your soft tissue in the leg, if you think of it kind of like a tow rope, whenever you stretch a tow rope, that rope can take several hits. That's what it's designed to do. It's designed to pull, it's designed to hold something in place, to secure whatever you're tying. But the more times we hit that tow rope, it starts to fray. And whenever we put too much weight on our tow rope, or we tow something that's too big, the fraying gets worse and worse. And then eventually what happens? The tow rope breaks. And so you can kind of think of your soft tissue in the horse's leg a little bit like that tow rope. So we have all of our muscle structure in the top of the horse that ties into our soft tissue that leads down into the hoof. And so as we get these tight, like the scapula gets tight where you can't get your fingers underneath it and your horse starts to get sore or they start to get overworked, all of this starts to contract and drop. And so as our muscles start to get tight, then we're pulling on the soft tissue that's lower in the leg. Also, too, as our muscles start to get tight, it changes the way this horse hits the ground. It changes the way this horse moves. It changes the biomechanics of the way the horse walks. And through changing how that horse is walking daily, then we end up with hoof patterns and the different wear. Maybe a foot starts to club, or we start to wear away an inside or an outside of a hoof. And then as that time goes on and on and on, then you go to performance and you end up running on an unbalanced hoof, which puts you at risk for going back to the soft tissue injuries. And so those are some of the things that I teach my customers to look for, when you're purchasing a horse or just looking at your own. Now, most of the horses that we work on in here, like I said, are in a rehab setting. So we're used to dealing with injuries. We're used to doing a lot of body work. But there's a few things that you can also do at home or at a show. So again, we go back to starting at the top of our horse here and looking at this muscle structure. I compare both sides, one side to the other. Do I have a side that is more tight? Do I have a shoulder that appears taller or appears bigger? And so if I have that happening, I usually will have a balance issue with the front feet. And so if you want to walk around this way, we're going to show kind of how to check for high-low imbalance in the feet. Yeah. So if you can stand your horse up and get them just as square as possible, if you have trouble telling if one hoof is taller than the other, one way that you can do it is to measure off of the knee. So looking right through here, you can ask yourself, like, okay, do I have one knee that is sitting higher than the other? And usually if you do, that's going to tell you that you have a hoof imbalance in the horse. Now, that being said, if your horse will not stand square like this one is, a horse that's got their feet staggered, that's going to change the way that you're looking at the body. So to make sure that you're getting a good, accurate read, you want to have that horse as square as you can, to the best that horse will let you look at them. And so then kind of traveling down the leg, one of the things that I will look at before I do any stretching or palpation or anything like that is, again, I'm checking for the balance in the feet. I'm also going to look at the hairline on the horse. So is my coronet band, is it pretty uniform all the way around the hoof? Do I have a big dip or a big wave? Do I have an old scar from an injury that changes the way this hoof grows? Or does it look pretty uniform all the way around? Another thing that you will notice in some horses, if they have rings around their feet, that can be something where they've had heat in the feet for whatever reason at some time. That can be nutritional imbalance, and then of course laminitis, things like that. But just how smooth are the feet all the way down? Now you will notice some rings and changes in them that happen with the changes of the seasons, usually whenever our forage changes. But that's no different than your fingernails growing at different rates during different times of the year. That's something that isn't to be really of concern. And so whenever I'm traveling down the leg on this horse, again, I'm going to start to, ask myself, like, okay, do I have any tight muscle through here? Do I have tight muscle on the inside? And I'm also going to ask myself, do I have any heat and swelling? And this is something that when we clean horses every day, we routinely check. Just running the hand down the leg, do I have any swelling in my suspensories? Do I feel any bumps? Do I feel any heat? Just checking for that heat daily will really, really help you out going down the road. If you're at a show and you are stalled on concrete, a horse that's completely healthy may end up having some heat down in the legs just from being stalled and being stagnant. And in that case, icing would be a great idea, because you don't want to run and compete whenever you've got heat and inflammation that is keeping your soft tissue from being able to support and glide like it should. So whenever I pick a horse's feet up to clean them, the next thing that I'm going to check is I will usually just kind of run a hand over the ankle, and I'm going to flex my foot up and down. And so basically what I'm checking here, I'm not putting a lot of pressure, I'm not choking her leg, I'm just feeling how things feel underneath my hand. And so that's going to tell me, do I have any clicking? Do I have any movement? Do I have anything that's hanging? And so this mare has really good range of motion in her pasterns. We find with body work, horses that have navicular or that maybe bear more weight on one foot than the other, they will be very limited in their range of motion. So when you have a horse that this is about their max range of motion, you're probably dealing with some sort of inflammation in that area. So see the difference here in this healthy mobility and how much movement we have versus a horse that maybe would just move like this. The next thing that I will check is I will kind of rock the hoof gently side to side, and just kind of rocking it back and forth and all the way around. You can also circle it. Again, this is something that's really great for horses that have if you have any sort of a navicular bursa issue or anything like that, that will help the range of motion here. So just rocking that leg around and then circling back the other way. And we can ask that horse to point their toe. We can ask them to bring it back. Just getting that range of motion and that circulation in the bottom of the leg. The other benefit to this is this also helps you to recognize what is normal for your horse and what is not normal for your horse. So whenever I rock that hoof back and forth, and if this horse was jerking her head up or she was kind of trying to set back off the stall, if she acted painful at all as I'm rocking this hoof, that would make me question, do I have a soft tissue injury that is down in the hoof because of the rocking back and forth? Your collateral ligaments that come in and they stabilize the hoof. What I have found in our practice is by rocking that back and forth, if there is any instability or any tear or damage down those collateral ligaments, those horses are not tolerant at all of moving the hoof back and forth like that. Yeah, what question?
Marianne asked, how do you know the difference between the rings? Something more sinister versus seasonal change?
Usually it is the bigger the bump is going to be more of an issue. So like your seasonal rings, you notice the hoof growth growing down. We can actually see if you can get close here. So you can see on this mare, see this little bit of a ridge right here? That's new growth. So we're looking at the new growth there versus our old growth here. So this would not be anything I would be concerned about, but I can still feel it and I can still see it. So your rings that are caused by heat and things like that will be a little less uniform, and usually they're going to be a little more prominent to feel. Okay, so now we've kind of addressed how to check this lower leg here, how to check down into the hoof. The next thing that we will look at is our hoof balance. So I'm going to look down this hoof the best that I can, and I'm going to ask myself, like, okay, does the heels of this horse look uniform? Is this shoe on flat? Are we level here? Do we seem like we have a lot less hoof wall on the inside versus the outside? Another thing that you can do is, take something and lay across the hoof. If you're not sure whether or not a hoof is level, then, take something that is and lay right across that hoof. And see how my scissors touch both sides of that hoof very evenly. So if I had a part of my foot that was unlevel, I would have one side that's not touching.
And another question we have is, as she tries to run away, is when do you know to use heat versus cold on legs?
Okay, so heat, as a rule, is going to give you more elasticity in the soft tissue, which is why we warm our horses up before we compete. Ice is going to help increase the circulation, and it's going to help diminish your inflammation. And how it does that is while we're icing that leg, you constrict your blood vessels, there's less blood flow, everything slows down, and then when you remove the ice, the body rushes a fresh blood supply there that's highly oxygenated, and so it's going to flush out the old supply, get rid of the lactic acid that is stagnant and trapped in that area, and then boost that circulation by adding that nutrient-rich blood. So there's really not a wrong time to ice. I know we went into that a lot with the last live that we did, was when to ice and how to do all of that. But if you're going to ice pre-race, I would do it like 2 hours before. Let that leg warm up, go through your warm-up routine, and then go ahead and compete. You could also ice afterwards to cool down any inflammation that's there and help that body to heal faster if you do happen to have any little micro tears or little strains or anything like that from the performance. You can also just ice routinely. Horses that are older really benefit from it. It's not something that you want to do every single day that you're training, but whenever you're doing really hard work or when you're on the road, I find that it's really, really beneficial, and it's cheap. It's really one of the cheapest therapies that you can do that really works. Good job. And so now we've kind of done our assessment. We've not found any heat. Like what the places that we typically see whenever horses stock up, the places that we typically see that fluid build up is right through here at the bottom of this ankle where everything kind of ties in and we have our support system. Usually your pockets of fluid will kind of start here and be the most noticeable. And also too, now, like as I'm feeling this mare's leg, I can feel the blood vessels, like I can feel the circulation underneath my fingers, but I don't have any more heat on this leg than the other. So I know I don't have an issue here. I'm just simply feeling the blood supply. So if I felt this mare's leg directly after she competed, I would feel more of a pulse right there because I'm simply feeling the blood supply. And then usually when that fluid starts to get trapped, then you start to see it come on up the leg. Sometimes we'll see horses that get a pocket of fluid just below the bottom of the ankle through here. And you'll be able to kind of feel it with your fingers. And so by learning what is normal for your horse, that's going to tell you when you should be alerted or when you should be worried.
Our next question is, what about sweating? When to sweat, what products to use, what to use to wrap the leg, and how often and how long?
Okay, so you can do this several different ways, and everybody's going to have their choice of liniment, their choice of poultice. I'm going to give a shout out to Leg Up Poultice. We like their stuff. Her products are great. And so let's go back to why you would use a sweat, why you would use a liniment, and why you would use a poultice. So your poultice is typically going to cool. It's going to tighten and try to draw any of that extra fluid out of the leg. Your liniments can either be heat-based or they can be a cooling liniment. We tend to do more of just a cooling liniment because I don't know these horses when they come in. I don't know which ones are going to be thin-skinned or possibly have a reaction. So we tend to kind of go more towards the cooling side of things, just because they tend to be a little more multi-purpose and a little bit more bomb-proof as far as not having to worry about them blistering or irritating. And then, of course, we also use some sweats and things that are that come from our vets that we use on actual injuries. And so, whenever you're wrapping a leg, typically you can leave it on overnight. So, 8 to 10 hours. Usually, we wrap the end of the day, pull it off the next morning whenever we feed. If I have fear that that horse is going to have too much heat in it, I may wrap that leg during the day and then come back down here and pull it off before I go to bed at night. If I'm worried about gathering too much heat, then I will not opt to leave it wrapped all night long. You've got to kind of break down that inflammation, in my opinion, before you leave it on there and just continue to sweat. But in your liniments, that's the whole purpose of them, is you're looking for that product to kind of be a derivative and drive into that tissue. And then you put your standing bandage and your Novo over the top of it, and you have your compression that pushes that fluid back up the leg. The important thing to remember is that whenever you're wrapping, when you're using a standing bandage, you're going to end right here at the calf of the ankle, and basically you're looking for compression to help push that fluid back up out of the body. We are not putting a standing bandage on to support any of the tendon and ligament structure because they're not that strong. What you're actually looking to do is keep that from swelling and let the compression push any extra fluid back up the leg. And so we have several wrapping videos with different techniques that we'll post on our page. The important thing to remember is you can do more damage with wrapping than not if you don't wrap correctly. And so whenever we have our education courses here and we train everyone, We keep them using a no-bow bandage until they get to the point where they're really comfortable with it. And then in some of our clinical settings and things, we do vet wrap, work with gauze, do some post-surgical things that get a little more advanced. And so, a lot of people, they will wrap whenever they're trailering. On that, I determine by how hot it's going to be in the trailer. So you're always going to have a little bit of heat just from having the wrap on there. And so, if it's 115 degrees outside and you're hauling down the road, wrapping may not be your best option at that point, especially if you're going to be in the trailer for 6 to 8 hours, because we don't want to add any more heat and cook these tendons and ligaments. Also, too, one of the things that I always try to point out with people is leaving your sport boots and your splints on at races. There is no reason for a sport boot to be on 4 and 5 and 6 hours over the leg. Those boots are not designed to be left on for lengths of time, because they are designed to have a very conformed fit to help in performance. It's the same reason that you don't walk around in an ankle brace all day long if you are healthy, because then that ends up just adding heat and needless pressure on the area. So a lot of people opt for your quick wraps and things like that just because they're easy and they're a little more foolproof than traditional wrapping. But as long as you have somebody that kind of can show you how to wrap, there's so many benefits to it. You can also ice, let the leg warm back up, and then you could do a sweat right over the top of that as soon as your leg is dry. It just kind of all depends what your goal set is and what you're working on.
Our next question is, could you touch on wind puffs, especially if they're chronic?
Yes. So wind puffs are a little bit harder because especially when you're looking at them from a chronic standpoint. And I don't have anything in the barn. I wish I did. That's a video that I think that we need to touch on. So a lot of people say wind puffs, just leave them alone. They're not going to hurt anything. And while that may be true, a lot of times they don't cause soundness issues. The horse I used to pro rodeo on, he had bumps on all of his legs. But as I have gotten older and learned more about the bodywork approach to it, anytime you've got scar tissue or anything in there, think of your tendons and ligaments like a pulley on a motor. Everything is running smooth. You have multiple pulleys going. Everything's working perfect. But you take one little bump and add in there, and now the pulley has a little bit of a jerk to it or has a little bit of a bump to it. It's not moving as smoothly as it normally would. So sometimes, especially if wind puffs are chronic, you can do anything that's going to help, your circulation, your range of motion, your choice, anything from, taping to massage to PEMF equipment. All of those things are going to be beneficial. They may not completely resolve the problem, but I will still typically tend to do some body work on those horses as well, myself. And we'll get to just a few of the leg techniques and a few little massage things that you can do also. And also on the wind puffs, liniments, your topicals, all of those things are appropriate. Icing's appropriate. Once a thing becomes chronic, you just kind of got to manage it because usually it's going to be there. And a lot of times people get defeated because they try to sweat those and don't ever get rid of them. But also too, I wouldn't ignore the issue either. So, okay, let's go. Let's actually go to a few massage techniques that we use. And so I'm going to grab my stool for this. Because of my health issues, you'll notice I work quite a bit on a stool. Everything in the barn kind of gets broke to me and my rolling stool. If you do choose to work with a stool and on horses, pick one that has rollers and one that is not going to easily fall over. So I would not choose to sit on a stool that I can't roll out of the way if this horse spooks and gets on top of me. I have found with myself and my health issues, I'm a little quicker to get out of the way if I can kick on this rolling stool versus trying to be on my hands and knees squatted under a horse. Other things to remember too, whenever you're wrapping, make sure that you're not directly in front of this horse's leg, because if this horse picks her leg up, she could catch my face. So sometimes as we're learning here on good horses, we may kind of end up having people where we necessarily wouldn't. But those are things to watch, making sure when you're wrapping that you don't have a hand down here where your horse can step on you. Again, definitely making sure that you don't have your face directly in front of this horse's knee. And so you will always see me kind of work to the side, and I'm always where I can safely kick and move away should something happen with this horse. And so talking about a few of the massage techniques that we can do, these are going to be very basic, like the same ones that I teach my owners. And so when we're coming down this leg, we're going to find an area that's tight, and we're going to kind of just roll back and forth. And so what we're doing here is we are just kind of moving and mobilizing that fascia, and we are increasing our blood flow. And so, like I could even, so here's your difference. So right here, I have muscle and all. I have muscle and skin and everything. And then when I drop down to lifting my skin, now I'm lifting and moving away from the fascia. And so I'm mobilizing that. Now, I'm not going to get into actual body worker techniques, but what I show my clients at home is how to maintain their horses in between using a body worker. And so say this horse had arthritic knees. Say this was a horse that had arthritis, we would still want to mobilize that area. And so I can teach my owners to just take their hands and just lift and kind of circle that fascia, and you can also lift and twist. So by picking up and moving that skin, I'm getting that range of motion in there. So say this horse had a high suspensory injury. So say that we had limited mobility here because we have an injury. Okay, now look at how my skin is not nearly as pliable and not nearly as movable because I have an injury below it. So while I'm healing this injury here, it's not inappropriate to come up here and just start to mobilize this fascia and try to get everything moving and try to let a little bit of this tension off and work my way up the leg and start to try to relax these muscles. And so as these muscles contract less and they start to relax, and then my injury starts to heal down here, we do a little bit more and a little bit more. And then as my injury is healed, look at how much more movement I have. And so the more movement that we can create in the body, the less this is going to hang up. Because look at the difference here in this horse being able to just pick her knee up. Okay, we have plenty of movement there. But if we have an injury, look at how much she's actually straightening against me. And that's because I'm pulling on this. And so to be able to free everything up above the injury, we want to hit that with some body work and work on it. And again, that's a very, very simple layman's guide to what we do with soft tissue work.
Another question. What is your approach and or protocol to addressing cellulitis or residual effects of horse having had cellulitis?
If it's active cellulitis, that's definitely something that you want to see your vet about, because they're typically going to put that horse on antibiotics. But we do a lot of course, here in our facility, we're going to use our salt spa. But if we were treating at home, we would do ice, we would do a sweat, and then work under the direction of whatever our veterinarian chooses, which is probably going to be some antibiotics, and they're going to suggest icing and cold hosing as well. Now also in this environment, we would probably use PEMF and some of our equipment as well. But the TheraPlate is usually not contraindicated for things like that. But if you're just working with what you have at home, it's usually going to be sweat, standing wrap, whatever medication that your vet suggests. No, and those things are something that can get out of control really quickly, so I would definitely not hesitate to take that horse to the vet.
Our next question is, how do you deal with a horse who has sensitivity and stiffness near the whorlbone?
Okay, so that's going to be, we'll touch on that a little bit when we get to the hind end. That would be something that our hind end stretches that we're fixing to do, that when I get to the stretching part, that will help. Also probably your corrective exercise. If that's a chronic pain with that horse, that may be something that needs to go to the vet or needs to go to the chiropractor.
And same goes for stifles?
Correct, yes. We talk on our corrective exercises about a lot of things that we can do with that. I will show a little bit of stifle walking to the hind end part. You may have to remind me and we'll revisit those questions. But anyway, so coming back, I'm going to jump back to the front foot here since that's where I'm at. But whenever we're talking about body work that we can do, working our way on down the leg, we can do the same thing that we did with the knee down here at the ankle. And so I have some horses that I will hold the leg on while I'm moving the skin and lifting and moving the fascia. Again, going back to our horse that was really stiff right here, you can just kind of work back and forth and lift and move that fascia and just kind of loosen all of this up. You can also do this is not contraindicated at all on just your plain healthy horse. This is just a great addition to any warm-up routine to get ready for a show. And especially on this horse where she's kind of got some hair there, I can kind of pick that up and lift and move. This is actually one of the human techniques that we use whenever we're doing scalp massage, is just using the hair to lift that skin off of that fascia and get everything gliding really, really smooth. And so what I like about this mare is like she has a lot of great movement in this lower leg. And so those are a few things that you can do just to kind of help warm that muscle, especially in the wintertime when your horses are not nearly as pliable and it's cold outside. But it's not inappropriate to do in the summertime either, because what you will find is if you have any little pockets of fluid, by doing these techniques, you're going to kind of help that horse work that lymphatic fluid back up into the body.
Okay, we've got a few more questions.
Okay.
If the horse has had a pulled tendon but is now healed but still favors the leg, what is recommended there?
Probably a vet recheck on that one. But if there's a reason that they're still favoring the leg, there may be some scar tissue buildup. That's kind of one of the things that we do is try to prevent scar tissue. Preventing it is much easier than trying to go back and work on it. But if the horse is still really off on it, I would still go back to the vet and kind of do a recheck there. Maybe there's something not quite healed completely, or check your hoof balance, because that's another thing too. If our hooves are not balanced, then it's very hard to stop the overcompensation patterns in the muscle.
All right, our next question is, what could be causing a joint popping sound in a 6-year-old? There's no lameness, and the exam did not come up with a cause.
That's such a wide open question. Typically, there would be inflammation of some sort, and you would have to just kind of figure out. I have seen everything in years of practice. I've seen everything from nutrient deficiency all the way to inflammatory diseases like EPM and things. It's such a wide open. That's one of those. It's very hard to tell without seeing the horse and seeing the horse in motion. Maybe on that one, it might be worth getting a body worker out there. So if the vet's not finding anything lameness-wise, Vets grade on a scale of 0 to 5 of lameness. So you can have a horse that has incorrect body movement, but isn't textbook lame. And that's where I feel like a lot of people get really aggravated at their vets, and they go, oh, I spent all this money with the vet, and he didn't find anything. And so then in that case, maybe we turn to some body work and corrective exercise and look at it from a muscle standpoint. Or we look at nutrition. We look at things that also, your tendons and ligaments are fed by your nutrients. So dry, brittle, soft tissue can be caused by incorrect nutrition too, or lack of nutrition.
Okay, I'll do 2 more and then I'll let you get back to your thing. If you have a horse with a healed check ligament injury, any specific massages or stretches to do?
Yes, you could actually do any, as long as it's healed, you should be able to do any of the stretches that I have shown. And just kind of like the massage that I did here on the front leg, you can come right back here to the hind leg and do the very same thing. So whenever we are, wanting to work that hop, just like we work the knee, we're just going to lift and move the skin around. We're going to rock the skin back and forth. And so you're going to do the same thing in the hind end of just we're going to do the same thing in the hind end of just going right down the back of the leg here, and we can move that fascia around this way. We can go down to our ankle, mobilize. So basically, any of that is still going to help. Check ligaments are a little bit hard because a lot of times you have those and you don't have any heat or swelling, so you don't have. Sometimes they end up really being hard for vets to diagnose. But any of that would help as well, just to kind of increase your circulation.
Our next question is going to be, what exactly is keeping the fascia tight? Is it inflammation?
It can be. It can be incorrect movement. It can be overbuilding of muscle. That's kind of a case by case. Well, going back to the nutrients on that too. I've seen horses that were so tight and bound because they were unable to process the amount of protein that their owners were wanting to feed them. So there's kind of a whole variety of things that can cause that.
And
incorrect saddle fits.
And it is on a healthy horse.
If it is on a healthy horse, maybe incorrect fitness. It's just hard because, without seeing the horse, some horses are just more tightly bound, just like there are people that are more tense and more withdrawn. A less confident horse may be a little bit more withdrawn and locked down with less freedom and less movement. Horses that have a real blocky build to them are going to have a little more restricted movement if they're super heavily muscled compared to maybe a horse that's like this that has a little bit longer body type. And then again, going back to checking your nutrition, that would be another thing that, make sure that you're not giving more protein than the amount of work that horse can burn off. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few stretching techniques now. And I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this because, like I said, we do have a video that shows stretching, using our stretches for range of motion whenever you're stretching cold muscle, like I am here, and then stretching, we have a mare that we stretch after we treaded her, so you can see the before and the after of how much better the stretches get whenever your muscle is warmed up and it's pliable. But we're going to just run through just a few of the stretches that we do here and that we teach our owners. Now, we have a few different variations that we do as body workers and therapists that are a little more in depth, but for the most part, these stretches you're not going to get into trouble with. But again, we don't want to stretch an active injury. We don't want to stretch a soft tissue tear. We want to make sure that we have a good, healthy horse And we also have to have, you know, a realistic expectation. Your horse is not going to stretch a huge, beautiful stretch the very first time you're teaching it. And so the first stretch I'm going to do, and again, if I hadn't seen this horse before, I'm going to run the leg. I'm going to check for heat. I'm going to check for heat in my hoof. I'm going to make sure that my shoe is in balance. Everything looks good there. And so then I'm going to flex this leg up. And this mare has really, really good flexion range. You will see a lot of horses that their range of motion is about like this. And so those, like, she has a really, really good range of motion on her front end. And so then I'm going to take my leg and I'm going to just kind of push her knee back and till I feel her reach a point where she kind of stops and hesitates. And so I'm not going to push her past that point. And I'm going to ask her to hold just about 10 or 15 seconds here, and then I'm going to let her give it back to me. And then I'm going to ask her to let her give it back. The other thing I want you to notice is see how tight the leg gets whenever we flex everything up. So if you're trying to figure out places that you might need to massage, here would be a good example because I do have some muscle tension through here. And you can see it running down into the knee. And so I'll do this about 3 times. And then I'm going to take, and you may have to swap in front of me. So this next stretch is basically mobilizing the shoulder. And so you'll see a lot of therapists do stretches similar to this. Whenever I am working with my owners, I feel like I need to give them a place to kind of have a measurement of knowing how good their horse is stretching. And so we're going to take this hoof and we're going to take it right over the knee, and then I'm going to ask this knee to come out right here. And so basically I'm using this as a unit of measurement because if my horse can only stretch right here and that's all of the mobility they have, then I need to continue to work on that and figure out what's restricting it. Where this mare, she does a really good job of coming all the way across, and then I can ask this knee to kind of chicken wing out. And so whenever you're doing these stretches, you want to make sure that you don't have your foot right underneath where if she takes her leg away from me that she's not going to get directly on my foot. The other thing you want to think about too is having your body squared up the best you can with your horse, because that's going to help the better body mechanics you have. It's going to help keep you from getting hurt while you're doing the stretches. And so then after I do that one, I'm going to bring the leg out forward. And you may want to come over on this side. And so again, I've got to remember that I am stretching cold muscle. So she's not going to give a huge, gorgeous stretch. There we go. And so I'm just asking her to go ahead and extend that leg. She actually gets a little bit heavy on me. And so when she did that, I kind of asked her to step back just a little bit. Good girl. And so see how she gets heavy? And you can actually see with her hind end. And so whenever I have a horse that's really trying to give me a good stretch like this, I don't want to ask any more, because if I step back and I pull her leg, see how I pulled her off of balance? So that's what I don't want to do, because that will cause your horse to spook, and it's not great stretching. And so I see a lot of people that do that and they want to hunker down on the hoof. See, now she doesn't have as much confidence in me because I just dropped her foot. And so whenever she drops all that weight in, I'm going to kind of give it back to her just a little bit. That way she doesn't dump on me. Good girl. And so then I can actually take this hoof and go one step to the inside. Girl. Back to neutral. Good girl. And I can go one step to the outside. And then I'm going to finish right back at neutral. Good girl. Girl. And like so, when you go to set this leg down, you know, a lot of times I will do a little bit of a circle here. just anything to kind of shake the leg out, and then set it down. And that's a really good set of stretches for your front end. Job.
Do you have any recommendations for a 6-year-old gelding coming back from kissing spine surgery, short and or long term?
Yes, we do a lot of kissing spine rehabs here, and it comes to fitness. We like to get those horses right after surgery if possible, because then we can prevent the scar tissue versus having to work through it. But if you're going to do that at home, I would recommend getting some PEMF, getting something that's going to help prevent scar tissue, but then also doing some body work over the scar to kind of help break that down, because you've got to be able to saddle over the top of it, and we go back to having sticky fascia, we end up with pain where our saddle goes. Core strength and glute strength is everything on those horses. So, yes, we do a lot of those. If you have other questions, message me on that, because that may be a longer topic than this live is.
Next quick question is, how do you keep the horse from dumping their foot during the stretch?
So with her, I was having to kind of go back and almost kind of pop her knee up, which is why if you have a horse that you're trying to encourage to stretch, usually I'll reach up and kind of grab the elbow and ask them to extend a little bit more, where she almost kind of wanted to overextend and dump all of her weight on me. And so whenever she dumps all of her weight, I was just kind of asking her to kind of bend that knee and asking her to shift her weight back just a little bit. And then I was letting her come back at me with it. And then I'm going to ask her to lift up there again.
Next question, and then we'll move on. Is cold stretching ever recommended, or is a quick warm-up more beneficial?
It depends on what your goal is. So whenever we stretch muscle that's cold, I'm not going to ask for a big dramatic stretch. But I can still do a lot of range of motion things, and it's definitely going to help. But you just don't want to pull and tug and risk that injury. You know, I'm just going to let the horse take it to where they're comfortable, and I'm going to stop right there. You know, it's like when we're doing body work, if your horse has a body work appointment, we're not typically going to say, hey, go run your horse, and then let's work on it. We're going to kind of create that circulation through there. So, for instance, she probably would have stretched better on this right front leg that I've done all the body work demonstration on. I just chose to switch sides so she didn't get bored. So it's not necessarily contraindicated, it just depends what your goal is. Okay. So now moving on to our hind end, we had some questions with it. Kind of going back, like I'm going to kind of go back and I'm going to start with the stifle. It's okay. And so this mare is one that we've actually kind of been working a little bit with doing some stifle massage. I don't know which way is going to be the best beneficial way for you to see. But so what I'm going to do with this mare is I'm going to do just kind of some heat compression with my hand. So basically I'm just pushing my hand into that patella. So for those that don't know, our stifle is like our kneecap. And so now she's kind of got that all relaxed. I can even kind of mobilize it back and forth here. And so I am using fingertips worth of strength. If you use too much, they're probably going to kick you anyway, so you're going to end up in more danger than they are. But this is a very delicate area. And so another thing that I will do a lot of times, and this goes along with one of the stretches I'm fixing to show you, is I have a really wide stance, because if she picks her leg up, she's probably going to swat at me about right here. So I'm trying to get my feet where I'm not standing here where she can get on top of me. But I have one hand right around the back of the leg, one hand right underneath around the kneecap, and I'm just going to rock this mare back and forth. It's okay. And what I have found with this little move right here is when you have a horse that has a stifle issue, or that needs a stifle looked at, you're either going to feel that patella popping, and you're gonna feel it not gliding smooth underneath your hand, or your horse is gonna kind of get fussy on you. Now, you kind of have to read your horse just a little bit, because they may just be wondering, you know, why you have your hands on the inside of their leg. A lot of people don't desensitize their horses to this area. And see how this mare moves pretty good? There's, like, it's gliding back and forth. There's no popping. There's no hesitation. I could even reach up if I wanted to and just kind of rock her with her tail while I've still got my hand doing a little bit of light compression over that patella. And so most of the time the horses will find it's really, really relaxing. And so that's one of the things that you can do, especially if you have some fluid on that patella, because the heat from your hand and the compression is going to kind of help non-invasively push that fluid back into the body where you want it. And that's going to help your patella glide a little bit better. That's also going to help heat it if you're doing something pre-race. And then we also have a series of stretches that we've done videos with, showing how to do hip stretches, showing how to do your belly lifts and things like that. So I'm going to move on to how I would stretch a hind leg. And again, we have videos on these if you need to go back and see the slow motion of it. With your hind stretches, it's really important to make sure that you've got a square stance because of how much power the horse has in their hind end, and also that you're aware of where your feet are, that you're not going to get your feet underneath that horse's leg. And so, you know, it's going to take some time to master them, because we stretch a lot of horses here, and even though I try not to, like, drop a hind leg, there's times that they're going to pull their leg away from you. And once that's also too where it's important to start learning about your horse. You know, is that a pain response? Is that a behavior response that you need to work through, and how to know the difference? So whenever I go to pick this hind leg up, the first thing I want to know is how easy was it for this horse to pick her leg up. She didn't have a whole lot of trouble with it. And so, you know, that leads me to think, like, okay, she should be able to stretch this leg fairly well. Again, I'm going to run down, I'm going to check and see, like, you know, do I have any trouble getting anything to glide or move? Do I feel anything in my soft tissue? Did I see anything in the hock? Did I have any heat in the hock? If all that's a no, then I'm going to come forward with the leg. I'm going to make a platform with my inside hand. I'm going to have my stance wide and my body square to take the weight. My second hand's going to go on the back of her hock. And so I'm going to ask her to move forward. And so what I'm looking for here, ideally, is a horse that has enough flexibility to really sink into this stretch and drop her ankle completely. What I'm probably going to find today is that she can't do that simply because she's not warmed up. So here's where it becomes a range of motion stretch of, like, okay, that's a pretty good stretch. Like, I'm okay with that. Where if she was warmed up completely, I would probably want a little more drop out of this ankle. But for today, and what we're doing, I'm satisfied with that. The second stretch, I'm going to make a bracket with my hand around my ankle, and then I'm going to make a bracket around my hock. So I'm not pulling on the ankle, I'm not pulling on my hock. What I'm trying to do is stretch up and open my pelvis higher. So I'm basically using my bracket, it's okay, to guide my leg out. It's okay. So she's a little more resistant on that. And what I would like her to do, ideally, is point that toe like a ballerina, where again, because her muscle tissue is not warm, she may not be able to do that. I can also take this leg and kind of mobilize it around. I can do a circle with it. Just anything to get that moving through there and to feel it in my hands. Again, I'm not forcing anything. I've also seen this stretch done this way by holding the hoof. I don't feel like I feel as much there. And usually what I'm looking for is hang-ups in this soft tissue around the ankle. So that's why I prefer to have my hand on the ankle. And then I'm going to move from that stretch to squaring my body up, getting my legs out wide where I can take the weight of her. And I'm going to stretch the hind leg. I'm going to stretch back. And I'm also going to see how this mare fades. So like, see how she slightly fades to the inside? So again, I'm going to encourage her to open her pelvis up by taking one step to the side. And I'm going to bring her leg that way. Now, if we were, again, if she were warmed up, I would probably be getting another 3 to 4 inches at least out of these stretches. So that's kind of your difference in not forcing a horse that's not warmed up. Again, because you don't want to be, I see people that yank and pull and then they yank harder on them, and that's not actually building any communication in the body. Because what we want to do is just slow and easy and not demanding. So, yeah, those are, and again, we've got videos on all of that. Any last questions or?
I think there was one whirlbone.
Okay, so with the whirlbones, I would see if Miss Merrill do it. Oh, she made it a little bit sore for this one. So yes, absolutely. So that would be something that, again, you can have a chiropractor check, you can have a vet check, but you know, if you've got inflammation in that bursa sac, then you know that again that may end up being a veterinary issue. But that stretch where we come out, that really opens that hip up, will help with that. Corrective exercise will help, but you know that's definitely something where that horse may need adjusted, just depending upon what you're working with. Also, too, like I have a little bit of a thing. I will go around and kind of mobilize. She's like, no, I'm not going to do the hind end. But you can mobilize your SI, your point of the hip, your hip joint. Even to some degree, that stifle rocking will kind of help loosen that up. But I would definitely have that checked out if that's something that's chronic.
We've got 2 more questions. Any recommended stretches or bodywork techniques for a horse with sticky stifles? He has not had surgery for it. We mostly manage with exercise.
Any of the techniques that we just talked about would work. Usually your stifle horses will have a little more trouble coming out with the leg, but those 3 stretches that we did there really help mobilize kind of the full circle of the hind end. With that horse, I would suggest maybe doing even some trotting poles, like getting those legs moving up and down, making sure that your glutes aren't weak, because if your glutes are weak, then you're going to have more stress put on that stifle. One thing with stifle horses too that I have found in my experience is they do not handle heel and incline work nearly as well as the average horse. Some of them do not handle it at all, and some of them have trouble with long trotting. So make sure you're building your exercise program to your individual and not to what the industry tells you should be doing with a horse. Make sure that you are doing what is necessary for your horse.
This one's a little off topic, but I think it's always a good question to hear. Will you be doing your courses soon? I know that's a little off topic, but I know you have the respiratory course and different courses. I'm interested in all of them, please.
Yes, so you can check out our other Facebook, which is the Association of Certified Equine Therapies. You can also find us at learnequinetherapy.com. And that has the rehab course on there. That also has our horse owner course. The respiratory courses on there. We also have several body worker instructors that come and teach courses here. We have Dan Markin that does the equine flexion therapy. We have Layla Harris that teaches the holistic horse modality. And so we're actually adding, I know we have 2 different instructors that are interested in adding taping courses that will be taught here at Superior Therapy. But we have a brand new Learn Equine Therapy website that will be rolling out in April. And we've got a lot of great features that I think y'all are going to like, and a lot more classes. We're starting to partner with more instructors and give you more options for things that you can learn. You can come and learn as horse owners, or come and learn as professionals to be able to take care of your horse better. That's why we do all of these. That's why we're down here in the barn doing these lives, is we just want people to learn. And it's not a substitute for veterinary work. It's not a substitute for your body workers. It's being able to maintain your horse in between those treatments with those professionals, as well as knowing what's going on with your horse. Another thing, real quick before I end, going back to kind of what we started with the feet, hoof wear patterns on your hind feet. So when you see horses that have what we call a spade foot, where you have a lot of flare that's coming out off the hind hoof, maybe to the point that it's not even round any longer, those are compensation patterns usually coming from somewhere higher up. If you have a horse that's constantly dragging their toes off, and they have just the front of their hind foot is completely squared off, that would tell me that horse is not lifting that foot. They're just choosing to drag it. And so then, we start to look for, patterns in the muscle of, do we have an SI issue going on? Do we have a stifle issue? Do we have a neurologic issue going on? Pay attention to the way that your horse's feet are shaping themselves. We see a lot of people that come in and their horse has a club foot on one side, and rather than be super frustrated with their farrier, or that their farrier is not doing a great job, sometimes it may simply be that they are overloading so much weight onto that foot that it has caused it to club. So, again, the more you know about your horse, the more it's going to help your vet, and the more it's going to help the professionals that you have in your life to help take care of that athlete. So I feel like that's a good note to end on if we don't have any more questions.
We'll do one more question, and then another question after that, and then 50 more questions. My vet recommended stretching and mobilization for an EPM horse who stumbles regularly. Are there any specific ones you would recommend, or just the ones you are showing?
You can do these, but make sure your horse is stable. If you still have a lot of instability in that horse, then that horse may not be ready for stretching yet. Because just how I showed this mare here, just how I showed whenever I applied too much pressure on the front leg, and I immediately pulled her off balance and she came forward. That is what you'll run into with those horses that are really weak. With our EPM horses, typically we start them on corrective exercise before we go to stretching with them, because we want to build that stabilizing muscle back, and we want to build that posterior muscle that's actually going to help be able to hold the frame and hold the joints before we're asking for big dramatic stretches. So that being said, on that horse that you're talking about, your stretches may look a little more like this. There may be very little movement to them. It may look a little more. I've had horses that this was their range of motion. This is where we started out with our extension. And if that's the case, maybe I would step up here and use the knee because that horse is a little more square. See how she's a little more balanced than when I asked her to go ahead and go into full extension. So sometimes you can modify those to still help and still create mobilization, but not ask what's beyond the scope of what the body can do at the time.
Okay, and what about if a horse has back leg problems? When she wants to canter, her back legs get caught up. Warming up helps, but are there stretches that help as well? They're trying to prevent surgery.
It would probably depend on what the issue was. Again, just kind of like I talked about modifying those there, you can still do the hind end ones and just modify them. Just ask for less of a stretch. Because each horse is going to have a different tolerance. When the body kind of says stop, you don't have to keep pulling. Just stop at that point, and the more frequently you do it, you should be able to get a little more elasticity and flexibility in there each time.
What about a horse that was born with a club foot?
Whenever they're actually born with a club foot, I don't know if Layla Harris is on watching or not, but Layla, if you're on this live, this would be a great question for you. She has a great first rib alignment stretch that is phenomenal to help those horses. And so I will come back and I will try to find your comment and I will tag Layla in it, or somebody who's watching tag Layla for me, because she probably has a video on why our first rib stretches are important. But whenever you have things like that happen from birth, sometimes it's how that colt was in the birth canal and things that happen through the birth process that change your patterns of movement. But yes, body work would be really important for that horse and beneficial. You shouldn't get into any trouble with any of the stretches that I've showed you tonight. But like I said, Layla's got a really good help for that.
All right, we'll do one last question. Can you point out where the stabilizing muscles are located?
Icy's wondering where her hay is. She says, I feel like I should be eating hay. I'm sorry, come again on that one.
Can you point out where those stabilizing muscles are located?
They run throughout the whole body. It's your posteroid system. So you have different sets of them running throughout the body. You have your fast twitch muscle or your gymnastic muscle, and then you have your posterior muscle. So if you want to dive into that, there are several anatomy apps, anatomy books. I don't think Jet touches on that in her. That would be more of the scope of like our physical therapy for horses book. That's a great one that we teach out of here that breaks down your muscles by category. So I know that wasn't a great answer for that, but that's like a whole anatomy lesson that I might need to break a book out for. All right, well, thank y'all for tuning in, and if you have other questions, feel free to message me. You can message us on the Superior Therapy LLC page. Also, we do a podcast, May the Horse Be With You. And again, the Association of Certified Equine Therapies, that houses all of our education and our learning courses. And we post our events and like our instructors that are coming there. And then be looking in April, we're going to have the brand new LearnEquineTherapy.com rolling out. But in the meantime, go check out the older version. Happy trails, y'all.